Hi, welcome to EDSC 550. This is week 6, and this week we are discussing counselors as leaders and advocates. So I'll be sharing my PowerPoint with you for today. So in this week, our book went over the history of counselors and our public educational system. And I'm going to go over a little bit about that. So, our public system began, in the early parts of our nation. Schooling was a little bit more haphazard. And so, many children were excluded on the basis of income, race, ethnicity, gender, geographic locations, and other reasons. And so children who didn't receive instruction, which were primarily white children, were educated through a hodgepodge of arrangements. So this is in the initial parts. Church supported schools, local organized by town or groups of parents, tuition schools set up by traveling schoolmasters, charities of school for poor children or run by churches and benevolent societies. Boarding schools for children that were well-to-do, the Dame School, which was run by women in their homes, private tutoring, homeschooling, work apprenticeship, and rudimentary instruction in reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, as the United States began to develop its country, democracy, and the origin of public schools, the national founders recognized that educating people for citizenship would be difficult to accomplish without a more systematic approach. So, our revolutionary leaders um, established the publicly funded or free schools by the late 1780s, and the concept of free public education didn't begin to take its wider course until about 1830. So then at that point, public education spread throughout the 19th century, and they were more common in cities than in rural areas. And then in the northern part, other parts of the country, it took longer for children of color, girls, children with special needs to gain access to our free educational system. Later on, we began to include diversity and immigration. So children of color were discriminated against in the to access the public education. Access was unequal for all other groups. There was an increased immigration placed, which created new demands on public schools. And then there was promotion for equity that became a permanent mission for public schools in the mid 20th century. And the goal for public education in the 21st century has shifted from providing access to ensuring that all students receive high quality education. And today, many schools are struggling to meet this goal of ensuring high quality education for all. So the book asks us to, question ourselves about our local, our current schools, and to take an inventory of the history of public education and become advocates for those that are still being discriminated against based on multiple reasons. And so they want you to take an inventory of federal and locally and ask yourself these following questions. What laws are in place that regularly surface as an issue within your school? In what ways did your school leadership adapt Every Student Succeeds Act? And then knowing that educational laws change with administration, what struggles does your school experience that directly relate to our federal current laws? And is your racially diverse school excluding marginalized group from access to athletics, gifted programs, or AP classes? And these questions came directly from the book as to how we can begin to question ourselves as staff members and how we can begin to be school counselors and leaders and advocate for those marginalized groups. So we have the multicultural social justice counseling competencies. And it offers that counselors um, a framework to implement multicultural and social justice competencies into counseling theories, practices, and research. It's developed into 4 quadrants: the counselor's self awareness, client worldviews, counseling relationships, and counseling and advocacy intervention. So in the first region, counselors' self-awareness, it talks about counselors developing self-awareness so that they can explore attitudes and beliefs and develop knowledge, skills, and actions relative to their self-awareness and worldviews. Counselors should be aware of their social identities, social groups status, power, privilege, oppression, strengths, limitations, assumptions, attitudes, values, beliefs, and biases. When looking at the client's worldview, counselors should be aware, knowledgeable, skilled, and action oriented in understanding the client's worldviews. Counselors should be aware of clients' worldviews, assumptions, attitudes, values, beliefs, biases, social identities, social group statuses, and experiences with power, privilege, and oppression. The counselors that are privileged and marginalized should also be aware, knowledgeable, skilled, and action oriented in understanding how the client and counselor's privilege and marginalized statuses influence the counselor's relationship. So the counselor should be aware of how clients and counselors' worldviews, assumptions, attitudes, values, beliefs, biases, and social identities, and social group statuses and experiences with power, privilege, and oppression influence that counseling relationship. So this is the third area or quadrant, which is the counseling relationship. And finally, the fourth region is the counseling and advocacy interventions. So counselors need to intervene with and on behalf of the client's intrapersonal and interpersonal skills, institution, community, public policy, and international global levels. And then the counselor also needs to address the interpersonal processes that impact privileged and marginalized counseling clients. Um, they also need to represent the social institution in society, such as schools, churches, and community organizations, and address inequities at that institutional level. And then the privileged and marginalized needs to address community norms, values, and regulations that impede the development of individuals, groups, and communities. So these are the 4 areas that we can advocate on our clients and continue to fight for the injustices, the social injustices that we continue to see in today's society. So remember that as a counselor, we must be equipped to understand the intersectional identities such as race, socioeconomic status, gender, disability, etc., and address the issues of power, privilege, and oppression present in schools and everyday interactions with students. This is one of our primary concerns. And here was a great quote that I found that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so this is about culturally responsive teaching. And we need to combine concern, compassion, commitment, and responsibility and action. When we care about our students' emotional well being and academic success, we are doing something that will have a positive impact on it. As a school counselor, the art of caring is probably, it might come easy to us, which is why we chose to get into the field. However, it's important that we challenge ourselves to take a step further and make sure that we lead by example, ensuring that the rest of our colleagues are also taking this caring approach towards all their students. All right, so that pretty much covers what we'll be doing for week 6. Remember, this week you have your chapter 6 that you're reading, and you also have a webinar on how school leaders can improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, and counselors as leaders in the school. And then for your assignment, you have your discussion board number 5 and 6, which is due week 6, as well as your marginalized poster. If you have any questions or concerns about the marginalized poster, please refer back to my video on and use the template. Important part for the marginalized poster is making sure that you utilize the template and read the rubric. The rubric will help you to ensure that you are including all of the information that is required to receive full points. Thank you and have a wonderful week.